Lucian was a little rural area. It's a part of Romania in that time. I was born and raised there. I went through public school there. High school we couldn't afford. High school was expensive. You had to pay for it. We were not rich, but I had everything what I needed. We were all right. My father used to peddle. I used to go from little town, you know, with a horse and buggy, selling shoes. You know, a Jewish boy, when he was 13, you became a man. And in those days, if you didn't further your education, you went to work.
One way or another.
So I went from Lucian, I went to Chernobyl, the big city. I was an apprentice in a store for 3 years. After 3 years, you had to go through the Chamber of Commerce and put up an exam and become a full-fledged salesman. And I was doing pretty good. And in 1940, the Russians came in. So when they came in, I went from Chernobyl back home to that little town to my parents. So I was working in a alcohol factory. We had the alcohol factory in that little town, and we had the sugar factory. And in June of 1941, the Russians left and the Germans came in. So all the Jews from that little town went to hide. I don't know what they call it, but big grass is growing around the water, you know, tall.
Right.
And we were all hiding there. And we stayed there for 3 days. And eventually we had to, well, you know, how long can you stay there? When we got back to our homes, the house was empty. Nothing was left. The population, you know, went and just rampaged. They took everything. You couldn't find a cup to have a drink of water. Then they took us all together again, and they marched us over the Polish border. The Polish border was about 30 kilometers, not far. They arranged for the elderly people to have horse and buggies. So I managed to put my father on one of them and my mother on another one, and we couldn't follow them. The young people, they marched in front, and the horse and buggies were in the back. We were over the border, and I was going through and to see where my parents were. 2 couples disappeared. My mother and my father and another couple, and from that group, and I've never seen them since then.
And so now you're alone. Now
I'm alone, strictly alone. The Hungarian army was there because they were with the Germans. And every Jewish house had a Star of David, but they were still home. And the rabbi of that town told the people to cook on Saturday to give us food. So in the meantime, they received the order from Bucharest that they should send us back. We came back, and we were there about another 2 or 3 weeks. And then they started again, and they marched us all the way from the Bukovina through Bessarabia, all the way to the Dniester. It is the border from the Romanian side to the Russian side. They marched us, and every day people just dropped. You know, I mean, it was hot, it was in the summertime. No food, no water. They marched us for 3 months. And from that group, I had 5 uncles and 5 aunts. They all died. At night, I used to sneak out in the garden and eat, you know, vegetables, fruit, whatever I could find, you know, and that's what kept me going. You become so hardened that actually nothing bothers you. You cannot cry. I couldn't shed a tear. Then finally they brought us to a place. It was called Jedinets, a little town surrounded with barbed wire, open space. And they kept us in there. Still no food, no water. I was walking one time on a highway, and I had a friend of mine, and there was a sergeant and a soldier in a horse and buggy, and he shouted. When he got to me, he took the whip, whipped the horse and whipped me as we run with the horses, and left me and didn't bother me. See? If your destiny is not to die, you can go through hell and nothing's going to happen to you. They put us in trains and they took us close to the Russian front. We slept in the railroad in those freight wagons. You know, in those days we had water pumps for the locomotives. There was no diesel in that time, you know. And we were built those water pumps for the locomotives in the railroad station. I had a foreman. He was a very nice guy. He used to give us chocolate. He used to give us cheese. He used to give us bread. One day he sent me to pick up a pipe. I didn't have any power in my hands. And when I picked that thing up, I dropped it in the middle of the railroad like this, you know. And the locomotive came and hit it. And the big guy from the railroad station was a SS guy. And he came running and pulled out the pistol, and he told me that I'm a saboteur. But my foreman saw it, what happened. He came running and explained it, that it happens, you know, I mean, it just fell off my hand. I didn't do it because I'm a saboteur. And he saved me. When the front started coming closer and closer, they put us in trains, and they were German soldiers, Ukrainians who were working with the Germans, and they were trying to leave the Ukraine because they were scared the Russians. We heard noises, airplane noises. The pilots were Russians, see? And they hit all the passengers. They made a bloodbath. They made a bloodbath out of there. And we ran, and we were hiding in the fields. In the evening, we went back towards the railroad, but the train was already gone. And the next morning, they took us over the border on the Romanian side. When we came on the other side, there were a Jewish delegation from the Joint Distribution Center, and they bought us tickets wherever we wanted to go. I decided to go home and see if somebody is alive. So when I came to Czernowitz, I've seen right away that I made a mistake. I haven't seen a young person around at all. They're going to take me. The war was still going on, and I was 20 years old, you know, and they'll take me. I survived Hitler 4 years. I didn't want to do it.
The Romanians would take you to...
No, the Russians. The Russians were already
Gotcha.
there, see? And he took me to the police station, and the police chief was a Ukrainian. I said, look, I just got back. I survived Hitler. I didn't know what I have to do. He put me in jail, and the next day, they took me to the penitentiary, and I stayed there for 6 months. And one day they opened the gate and they let me out. I remember the address from my uncle in New York. And I wrote him a letter. I want an affidavit. So he sent me an affidavit. I waited 9 years, almost 10 years. I was lucky, and I had a tremendous drive to survive.